Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast, a part of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, an education and marketing publication for the immigration law community that includes legal updates, interviews, discussions, education and CLE material, and more. Note that the information here is for general education only and not intended as individual legal advice. The laws change frequently, so you should consult with an attorney about your specific case. For more information, please visit immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this episode. We have a great guest today, Andrew Wilson, an immigration attorney out on the East Coast. Is that correct? What city are you in, Andrew?
Mostly East Coast, yeah. Buffalo, New York.
Buffalo, exactly, yeah. And you may have seen his name on a lot of the listservs. He had an approval of an EB-1A case that was originally denied, went to district court, and then they fixed it. We'll talk about that. That was towards the beginning of the year, a few months ago. It was a really, really good case. But Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. Enjoyed hearing you speak and present when Roman had you on his presentation, and was very impressed. So I'm happy to speak with you today.
I appreciate that. Well, tell us more about yourself. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town near Buffalo, New York called Lockport. I actually ended up going to high school in Canada, just across the border in Ontario. Went back to university in New England, in New Hampshire, and came back to Buffalo for law school.
Wow, the triangle right there, staying in the cold Northeast.
Yeah.
Are you a dual national?
Sorry, what's that?
Are you a dual national?
My mom is Canadian, but her case was a little complicated. She moved to the U.S., so no, we are not dual nationals.
So you had to get a student visa for Canada to go to high school?
I had a student visa for Canada, yes.
So you know the immigration process. You've been a non-immigrant before, so you have some feeling for it.
I have, and every time I cross the border, they still ask me about my schooling in Canada.
That's interesting. So how did you do the transition? What was your path towards becoming an immigration lawyer?
It probably was that schooling in Canada. My mom being Canadian, a lot of family in Canada, and then the school that I went to in Canada had kids from all over the world. So I was introduced myself, as you mentioned, to having to obtain a student visa to attend school in Canada. But then the school I was at had students from Venezuela and Mexico and Bermuda and Hong Kong and all over. So it introduced me to different cultures, and I think I was hooked or interested from that point going forward.
Very interesting. And what kind of practice do you have right now? What you focus on and the size and scale of it?
Right now, the majority of my practice is employment-based. My clients generally are HR or corporate counsel for companies all over the U.S. or all over the world if they're headquartered abroad. And they could be, a large multinational company or a small brand new startup and everything in between. Most of what I do, again, is employment-based. I also do family-based, do waivers and things like that. But I would say that 80% of what I do is employment-based, and again, working with company clients.
And what is the size and structure of your firm? Are you a solo or you have associates, partners?
The firm itself is large but not huge. It's over 100 attorneys and different office locations around the U.S. Our specific practice group is just 4 attorneys that solely handle immigration.
What's the name of the firm?
The short name is Lippis Mathias.
I see.
So it's one of those names that it doesn't roll off the tongue, but it's Lippis Mathias Wexler Friedman.
Very interesting. And so how long have you been practicing immigration law?
It is, let's see, over 20 years, getting close to 22 years. I was just cleaning out the basement, cleaning out some old boxes, and I found an article that I wrote for Computer World back in 2000. And I was surprised. I had forgotten about the article. I looked at the date and I said, I can't believe it's been 20 years since that. So that article was on H-1Bs, and it's interesting how little has changed in 20 years.
How did, that's a great marketing way to be in such a good magazine that's popular. How did you get an in to have your article published there?
Nothing more than, putting out a proposal or looking someone up online and say, hey, I have an idea for an article. This is what I'd write about. Are you interested?
Mm-hmm.
And they said yes. So that one was, I guess, more luck than anything, and that I didn't do anything special. I just looked up some people online for Computer World, sent them the email of my proposal, and they liked it. So sometimes it can just be as simple as that.
Did you, when you became a lawyer, was immigration the first thing you practiced right off the bat?
Immigration is the only thing I've ever practiced. I wouldn't know how to do anything else. Different practice groups talk about things, and I have no idea what they're talking about. It's been so long. But even in law school, my friends laughed. They were all doing tax or corporate or environmental law or things like that. And I said, I'm going to do immigration law. No one even knew what immigration law was. And they would laugh and they would say, what is that? I said, I don't know, but I'm going to do it.
What have you seen? It's been doing it for 20 years. And there's a lot of changes since you started in the sense for like how perm operates, the website came with regards to H-1Bs and the cap, there'd be no cap for a couple of years, all this kind of stuff. Could you just walk us down some interesting things you've gone through and seen in the last 20 years in this area?
Sure. So certainly one interesting thing that I remember, it dates me, but with H-1Bs, I remember when I first started doing them, you had to mail in the LCA.
Mm-hmm.
And it would take about a month or longer to get a certified LCA back from the Department of Labor. And I remember when everyone thought it was a big deal when you could fax in the LCA. And that seems laughable now, but yeah, that was a big deal back then. I even before perm, I was doing what they used to call reduction in recruitment, which was the labor certification system before perm.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a lot of that used to be through states. So individual states were responsible for labor certifications as opposed to a federal program. So when it comes to, now obviously there are set rules. It used to be, all right, what state are you going to file this labor certification in? How does that state adjudicate? There were 50 different ways of doing it.
Wow.
So that was always a challenge. I remember when they actually raised the H-1B cap numbers to, I believe it was over 200,000 H-1B numbers. Mm-hmm. But they were late in doing so. Right when it came into effect, one of our recessions hit. So those numbers were never used. But the idea that they would ever go above 65,000 or 85,000, no one ever thinks that they would do that, but they did long ago. And for several years, they went above 200,000. And a lot certainly has changed here in Buffalo. I do a lot of border work. Mm-hmm. And going to the border for 20 years has changed drastically and changed so much that we're not even allowed to physically be at the border anymore.
Yeah.
It used to be that I would be there with clients and advocate for a case and be able to, show the law or how someone's eligible. Now they don't even let attorneys at the border anymore. So that's a big change for me.
Yeah, I mean, especially for TNs, if you get like a management consultant or something like that, you really want to be there to explain things. Because I've had officers ask for stuff that's completely unrelated and not necessary. So, you wish between the embassies and CBP ports, you wish you could have a attorney there present, but it's not happening. What kind of stuff are you seeing? Right now, COVID-19, probably the numbers of people traveling across the border have come down drastically. I think we have a ban right now on border travel for non-essential travel. I'm not sure if that was extended or not. But what kind of trends are you seeing in the TN area? Anything like that you could share with our viewers?
So TNs, it's interesting because it's always the same issues that seem to pop back up.
Yeah.
And again, over the past 20 years, I've probably addressed these issues, and many people have several times, but somehow they don't go away. They go away for a few years and then they sneak back in. So, for example, doing a lot of TNs for technical salespeople. If someone is in a technical sales role where you have to have knowledge of engineering or chemistry or physics and things like that, and you're going out and doing technical sales, you qualify for a TN under that classification. And there are still CBP officers that if they see sales anywhere, they just assume that you cannot qualify. And they can't really point to anywhere that shows or confirms that you're not eligible. They just have that ingrained belief. So that always pops up a lot. More recently, there's been interesting analysis with respect to who can qualify for a TN under the economist occupational classification. And I was never a huge fan or never truly understood it, but it used to be if you had any type of related degree and position, you could qualify as an economist. If you're a stockbroker or working in insurance or financial analyst, you're an economist. And I really didn't agree with that either, but CIS and CBP came out and said, not everyone is an economist. So they narrowed that field. But what people don't realize is there is a broad field under accountants that encompass a lot of those duties. So many people think of an accountant as just doing a tax return, but there's lots of different types of accountants. There's management accountants, there's auditors, there's things that you don't necessarily think of that qualify under accountant, even an IT auditor, someone that's doing an audit of IT systems for a company.
Very interesting.
OOH has that under the accountant job classification. So where the economist door may have closed, I think the accountant door is more open than people realize.
Thanks for sharing that. I think it's going to help a lot of people. Another section of it is when software developers come, it's hit and miss on how you describe it. You see this a lot in Washington State kind of cases and Silicon Valley cases where they come. How they interpret a person as a developer and what a category. That's always a mess too, depending on how you describe it. But TN category is fascinating. You could almost have if you hunker down and do a lot of board work, you could have a pure TN practice and just focus on all that kind of stuff. It's very interesting. Now you also do work on all these business cases. The EB1A is one. And could you talk about the interesting case you had with a coach, a player coach, I believe it was, that they initially denied, and some background on that?
Sure. So it was a strength and conditioning coach for an NHL team, and we filed an EB1 extraordinary ability petition for him. He met at least 3 of the criteria. I thought he clearly met the final merits determination, which always can be somewhat subjective, but it's not supposed to be completely subjective. There are rules in how you're supposed to evaluate it. And they sent an RFE saying, we think you only hit 1 of the criteria. So then we followed up with our response, and then they denied the case saying that, okay, we think you did hit 3 of the, minimally 3 of the criteria, but you don't meet the final merits determination. And the problem with the denial was they misstated facts, just completely misstated facts. I don't know if they misinterpreted them or if it was purposeful. They made up their own rules beyond the rules that are set out in the field manual. They didn't apply the preponderance of the evidence standard at all. They even made up a new heightened standard of review. They just didn't follow the law, and they didn't follow their rules. After going back and forth, it was clear that nothing was going to happen through the service center. They were going to stick with their decision. So I decided to take the case.
Was this premium processing?
This was premium processing, yes.
So did you try to email them and try to fix it up and nothing happened?
Yes. Yeah, there was some back and forth saying, look, there are some clear errors in this decision, not only factually, but applying the law. They said, they claimed that evidence that was in place before you prepared the EB1 petition, carries more weight, meaning that if we started to put together evidence right as we were preparing the EB1, somehow that doesn't count. You're supposed to have evidence, from history back. You just collect it. You're just supposed to have it. They used the word solicited for the reference letters several times throughout the denial. They kept calling the reference letters solicited as, in a pejorative, meaning that you just got some buddies to write something for you. They said all the letters came from former coworkers, which was completely untrue. And again, they didn't apply their own rules of how they're supposed to evaluate evidence. So I said the only way this is going to get resolved is federal court. So thankfully, everyone agreed to allow it to go to federal court. So we filed. About a month after filing, I get a call from someone at USCIS in Washington. Very nice individual, very professional, and says, "Hey, basically, we're not really looking to fight this. If you withdraw and don't ask for attorney's fees, it can be approved." And about a week later, it was approved.
Interesting. It's a lot of these lawsuit kind of cases, they come back and say, if you don't pursue attorney's fees, I'm not sure how much money is it going to be necessarily that they're that big on attorney's fees. It's so important for them not to give out aegis fees. It's such a big deal for them. But thank God, at least that poor soul, the client, is probably stressing out about all this.
Yeah, it seemed clear to me that case was going to be denied at the service center no matter what. And they were going to take that position and, again, make up their own rules and apply a heightened standard no matter what. There was no way to make them budge.
Yeah.
They just weren't going to follow the law. So,
a lot of listeners have this question. Did you go to the AAO or did you skip the AAO and go straight to district court?
Skip the AAO. The AAO one would have been too slow in this case.
Yeah.
District court is much faster. I wasn't confident in going through the AAO just because, there's always the feeling that they're more likely to support a CIS decision. I have done AAO appeals for specialty occupation H-1B denials that were successful when the employer did not want to go to federal court. So I think I would still do an AAO case, but more likely only if the employer didn't want to go through the federal court process.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great information. Thank you for sharing that. It seems like every practice has to be doing that because of the RFEs and denials that we're seeing are so kind of belligerent, it seems. It kind of is offensive when you see some of these things that they come back with and you're like, did you even bother reading the thing? At least try to make an argument that's not, laughable sometimes when you see the things that they say, complete disregarding evidence and just making things up. I have this, every time I have an RFE, there's parts of it that are just completely made up that don't even make any sense. And so it's like, they don't even take the time to proofread it sometimes. And it's like, well, it doesn't look good when you're running an operation like that. It's very unfortunate. But on a happier side, what is one of the things that you like the most about your practice?
Definitely the number one thing is being exposed to really interesting companies, really interesting people, the majority of which I find are so much smarter than I am, more creative, like they're doing really great things. And the fact that I can jump into that world for a little bit and be part of it and help them to get to where they need to go to further whatever they're doing, I love, because there's so many types of companies and positions and things that I never would have heard of before if they didn't need a visa. So that part I love. Certainly like helping families be reunited. Love when someone becomes a citizen and it means something very special to them. And I enjoy working with HR. I think HR people and some of my SHRM colleagues are really some of the nicest people out there. So I like working with HR.
Oh, wonderful. Use any software? Do the HRs you work with require any software that you use that they prefer for immigration cases, or are they pretty flexible about that?
They are pretty flexible. We use Immigration Tracker for our case management system, and there are many different companies that do that, and I think they like having at least a case management system where we print out reports for them monthly. They can go in anytime to see who's coming up for expiration. I don't think they care which one, but they like having that. There are a few that prefer some type of systems, like, I don't know if you ever heard of Kiteworks.
No.
Or different things where they really have something specific if they're a bigger company. But most of them really want you to manage their immigration needs and make it as simple for them as possible. And however you do that, that's fine with them.
You mentioned Tracker. I was talking to Roman Zelichenko the other day, and I wasn't aware, but they were purchased by a private equity group at the end of July. So the ownership of Tracker went from, I think, Pearl Law Group, or maybe the partner, founder who owned it, and it was purchased. So we'll see what happens with that software. Whenever these things change hands, they either get really good or really bad. So we'll see which way it goes.
Immigration Tracker is interesting in that, again, I've been using Tracker probably, I don't know how long it's been around, but again, feels like close to 20 years. But we were using it right in the beginning, and I remember Julie Pearl, it was her husband that started it up. And obviously it was great because Julie was an immigration practitioner. It was like one of the first ones an immigration lawyer had a say in it. But I did not realize that they are required by a VC firm. I'll have to look that up. That's interesting.
Yeah, the end of July. I posted the article on it on the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox LinkedIn page yesterday or day before. I just when I became aware of it. Now, what is something you dislike or dislike the most, really, of practicing immigration law?
Well, we talked about it with that EB-1 denial. There is no doubt that I can't stand bad RFEs, bad decisions that aren't based on facts and law. If you have a reason why you think someone doesn't qualify and it falls under the law, and I look at it and I'd say, I can't believe I missed that, or that's interesting, or at worst, that's a reasonable interpretation. I don't agree with it, but at least it's based on something reasonable. That's one thing. But the RFEs and the denials that aren't based on any facts or the law are completely frustrating they're frustrating to me. Obviously, they're frustrating to individuals and companies. I almost wonder, what are we doing here if we document eligibility and document everything under the law and you say no because you want to say no? I find that really frustrating.
Yeah, and this stuff was happening before the current administration. This was a trend that was happening during Obama, where it wasn't as bad, but we get RFEs that were like, as you said, if it makes sense, then it is what it is. But when it comes back and it just doesn't make any sense and it disregards or it just changes facts, that really annoys me. Or they just make up standards that don't exist, and I'm like, where's that coming from? And they have to challenge them on that, go back and forth. That's a lot of extra work and too. Like, you're just hours and hours. And a lot of times you just do it for free. Somebody charge a client, but it's all unnecessary. It's really frustrating. Now,
I was gonna say, sorry. It adds up more than you realize too. What used to take 2 units of time now takes 4 units of time, and if you multiply that by 100 cases, it really starts to catch up to you.
My new office L1s easily, and I'm like, I don't want to say this, but usually it takes 50, 60 hours to do a new office L1, because I have to double check, triple check, have 3 copies of something, because I know the packets have to get so big because I know they could just randomly make a big deal about something. So I have to cover every base. And all of a sudden the packet gets so big that even if they're trying to read through it, they're going to miss something because there's just so much papers they have to go through. And that causes an RFE. And the RFE, then you got 10 hours of work there responding to even a basic on RFE because you got to double check. You might not have a second opportunity to challenge that RFE. So that's what kind of turns me off for practice. It might be their strategy to get lawyers so annoyed. Definitely in the removal defense realm, a lot of people are stopping removal defense because they're so frustrated with how everything works. It might be their tactic to frustrate us out of employment base. Luckily, we love our jobs too much to leave. But
well, yeah, if you think about it, for that EB-1 case, you have to have an individual and a client and everyone on board with filing a federal lawsuit, or else that case doesn't get done. So if anyone gets too frustrated and walks away before that, if that's their point, then they won.
Yeah, because they know most people are not going to file a lawsuit. They either don't have the money, or more likely they're kind of afraid of the idea of suing the government. That seems kind of out there. Or in your case, as a high-profile person, they might not want their organization or name and info in public records. So
they didn't. That was a challenge, in that the team was not sure. Sports teams don't want really any publicity beyond just the playing fields. So that was a concern. That case, I didn't charge anything because I really wanted to do it.
Yeah.
In the end, if I could make my way through a federal lawsuit, then the curtains behind you could do it. Anyone could do it. I'm a prime example that it's not as scary or difficult as it may seem.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and hopefully it gets more people into doing that, or at least have the confidence to mention it to their clients, bring it up. Because one thing is, when I first started telling clients to do with federal litigation, because I haven't really done it, I said it with some aura of hesitation. So then they sense it too, and they don't want to do it when their lawyer is not really sure. But it's something that's completely normal. It's within the law. You don't need to go to AO first. And it's just normal operating procedures nowadays. It's not like something that abnormal nowadays, because they're constantly doing this. So filing a federal lawsuit is just like filing an I-130. It shouldn't be considered any different. And there's so many people you could get help from and consult with, or even hire out to do that kind of work. And I kind of sometimes want it not to be settled, so go to open court so the whole world could see what we're seeing. But at the end of the day, you got to be careful for the client's interest, and if they want to settle it and it makes sense, almost all the cases, that's what happens. They don't want to go deal with the trial or have an open record.
Sure.
Yeah. So what is one of the most memorable moments you've had in your practice? I'm sure what we spoke about was one of them. Was there something else that stood out?
Well, there have been a lot at the border for anyone that does a border practice, being there with clients. It's kind of like being in court. I know it's not like court, but it's pretty interesting. There are some wild things. Over the years, the first TN I ever did, I walked in and the free trade officer called me back and he said, "I think this case is crap, but I'm not going to approve it." And I just started to sweat. Luckily, the case was approved, but you learn, and so lots of moments at the border. Probably my favorite moment is representing a family from non-immigrant all the way to citizenship. It was a family from Romania. The husband or the father was a dairy farmer. He came locally to this area in Buffalo. So I would go visit them every year. They invite me over for meals. Come over, have dinner with us after we'd get a visa approved, or after the green card was approved. So I got to see that family and those kids grow up from when they were 6 to they graduate high school. And the one kid was valedictorian of the school, and they were such nice people. It was really gratifying to kind of watch a little American dream for that family kind of play out, and how successful they were, and how the kids were really adapting and succeeding here in the U.S. as well.
I learned how to practice immigration law from a guy who started in the late 70s. And in 2010-ish, when I started working with him, he had these people I would come, and then their children would come, and they invite us to birthday parties, weddings, from like kids were born here after they got their green card. Then the kids would be an adult and invite to weddings, graduations. And that's same as you. It's one of the best parts of practice, the people, and seeing just people's lives grow. And almost always it's really positive growth, both for them and for the country. So it's a very satisfying experience to be part of.
Well, what we see, so many of them are so hardworking. Again, this individual was a dairy farmer. My father-in-law happened to grow up on a dairy farm, so he'd always tell me stories about how difficult it is, getting up at 5:30 in the morning. There are no days off. It's your life. And this dairy farmer from Romania and the farm owner would talk about how they tried to hire people, but they'd only last a few days because the work was so hard. They couldn't find anyone. And this individual from Romania just worked, loved it, and was successful at it.
Wonderful. Do you have any advice for any immigration attorneys that are starting, even exist, about, practice, either education or business wise? Any advice that you have to give, or that wish you had when you started?
Sure. Certainly, I think empathy is really important. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the client and what this means to them. It may look like a manila folder on your desk with the name on it, but obviously it's their life. So when they are anxious, upset, nervous, all of those things, you have to understand why and help them. Certainly I could have taken more psychology courses that may have helped, but I don't think we can truly appreciate what it feels like to have a lawyer be in control of your life, and you really can't do much about it except ask for updates. So I think we have to appreciate as best we can what that would feel like. I didn't realize how much marketing and business development was really part of the job. I mean, I was naive, I think, coming out of law school. And I thought, I just want to handle these cases, and never really thought where they came from. They'll just be there. And then pretty early on, I looked around, at least where I started out when I first started practicing, and I thought, boy, if I don't get work and learn it, it's just not going to happen. So the sooner you find ways that you enjoy doing business development. I mean, if you find something you enjoy, it's going to work better. But certainly, I wish I knew a little bit more about marketing, or the fact that you're going to have to be a salesman like everyone else at every other job. Everyone's a salesman on some level. But the fact that I do have to market, or else no one's going to show up and ask me to handle their case.
What were one of the first things you did for marketing when you started that you got your first clients?
So early on, I pretty much tried everything. I would write articles, like with Computer World and other publications. I would speak at conferences, some of those traditional things. But then early on, again, it shows how old I am. The internet was still really just kind of kicking in when I started to practice. And the firm I started at didn't even have a website when I started working there, which is hard to even picture today. But so I wanted to start that. I used to do weekly chats every week. I'm still involved in online forums, LinkedIn now. I try and be active on that. But while all of those are important, really the best marketing tool I've always had is really building relationships with clients. So that part you can never forget. And to me, it's always been the best marketing tool. I try and be more relationship based than transactional. It's not a transaction. The case is done. Thank you. See you again. It's forming that relationship, doing good work, and then they will refer you other work. That's always been the best marketing tool for me.
Makes sense. Now, kind of getting out of immigration, it's the last question, but what kind of outside hobbies do you have outside of immigration law?
Probably kids, and kids. Some of my brothers will always call and they'll say, did you see so-and-so around town, or did you do this? And I said, if they weren't in my office or my living room, I haven't seen them lately. So I have 2 young kids, so certainly trying to keep up with them. If I do get some free time when the weather's nice, I like to garden. I like digging in the dirt, see if something can grow, since we have a short growing season here in Buffalo. And then, like most people in Buffalo, I'm a huge football fan with the Buffalo Bills, and a hockey fan with the Buffalo Sabres.
Wonderful. What kind of stuff are you planning?
The older I get, I try and plant things that are easiest to grow. So there's annuals called coleus. They can be really colorful, and they really spread out, and you don't have to do a thing. So that I enjoy.
I was thinking about planting some potatoes to make it easier for myself. We tried this spring planting a bunch of stuff, but all these slugs came and ate everything. So that was kind of frustrating. And we got all these things to stop him, but none of them worked, and it became too much of a hassle. So we have all this like pots and stuff that are just sitting there with dirt and nothing going on.
That's always frustrating too. Here in Buffalo, we have rabbits and deer that will eat pretty much everything. Yeah,
but it's a great hobby. So I mean, sometimes in my old houses we do stuff on the balcony where it's got more controlled. But it's hard keeping up. That's why unless you have to water it and it handles its own watering, that's kind of stuff, it's much easier to do. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure, before this, we had a phone call a couple weeks ago, and I think the phone call lasted an hour. And I know you and I could talk forever, but always good to just let people know about yourself and just who you are. If someone wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way? Do you have any social media handles that you could put out there?
I'm definitely on LinkedIn. I have no idea what the handle is.
I'm fine to put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I was going to say, probably the easiest way is to just Google my name, Andrew Wilson Immigration, and my firm website will come up. And then you can see all of my info on my bio page.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
All right. And before I forget, I want to, I'll follow up with you. I want to look at your lawyer's toolbox stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to be a new customer.
Oh, wow. It's great. Thank you so much. I'll set it up with you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, if you send me an email on how to get set up, I'm in.
Sounds good. We'll do that. Thanks again. I'll send it the next 24 hours.
All right. Thanks, John.
You got it. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. For previous episodes and more, please visit the podcast page of our website, immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. You can also visit the Toolbox YouTube and LinkedIn pages to catch the video versions of these podcasts, news updates, and a lot more. Immigration lawyers can also contact me to join the private Facebook page. The email is info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com.